Okay, so now we're going more into the doctrine of Buddhism. So the actual doctrine, actually most of it, in fact probably all of it is encompassed in this Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. This is the first sutta taught by Buddha called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Actually a very long name, but if you break it up, you can make quite a bit of sense into it. So this is the first teaching taught by the Buddha to the 5 ascetics at the Deer Park in Sarnath. So Dhamma, this is the first part of the name. Dhamma means the teachings of the Buddha. Dhamma has a very wide meaning. It can mean the teachings of the Buddha, it can mean the truth leading out of the way of dukkha. And chakka means wheel. Pavattana means setting in motion. So Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first and probably the most important teaching of the Buddha. So this actually means setting the wheel of the Dhamma in motion. So Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, setting the wheel of the Dhamma in motion, discourse. On some temples you can see this on the roof. It's quite nice. This means the Eightfold Path. So these 2 deers, like I mentioned, the first teaching was at the Deer Park at Sarnath. So this signifies the first teaching, the wheel of the Dhamma and then the deer. Some temples, I think more Mahayana or Tibetan temples, you can see this. This is quite nice. Maybe you can keep a lookout the next time. So the Dhamma wheel signifies Buddhism, is one of the symbols of Buddhism, the Eightfold Path. Another symbol is the footprint. As I mentioned just now, after the Buddha's passing away, it's only about 400 years after he passed away, then the statues started to surface. So before that, they used things like the footprint to denote the Buddha. Another thing they use is the Bo tree, the Bodhi tree. This is actually the Bodhi tree in Sri Lanka. This Bodhi tree is supposedly the original one, because when the Buddha gained enlightenment in India, he was under the original Bodhi tree. So the branch from that original Bodhi tree was taken and then planted in Sri Lanka. So supposedly this is part of the original Bodhi tree. The one in India, the original one, died out. So the one in India is actually taken back from this branch. That means there's an unbroken lineage, supposedly, from the first Bodhi tree, come down to here and then back to India again. In fact, some temples in Singapore, they also take the branches from here, like in the Mangla Vihara, I think in Pokaksi. Some of the Bodhi trees, the branches are taken from here. So it's quite authentic. This is quite nice. So the Bodhi tree, one of the symbols of Buddhism. This one also. So how come this Nazi symbol is a symbol of Buddhism? Okay, let's look a bit closer into it. See here? Like the Buddha's chest. And correct, one of the things is the direction. So what actually is a swastika? Swastika is an equilateral cross with arms bent at right angles, all in the same direction, either towards the left or to the right. So as the sister pointed here correctly, the Nazi one goes to the right now. The Nazi one goes to the right and the Buddhist one supposedly goes to the left. But I think not 100% is like that, mostly it's like that. So this swastika is actually pre-Buddhist. It's not a Buddhist symbol originally. This symbol is found in almost all ancient cultures. Even in South America also they have this symbol. So all over the world, it's not tied to any particular culture or country, but it's a symbol used by all ancient peoples. So it's a symbol of prosperity and good fortune, and was widely found in ancient civilizations throughout the world, in Asia, Europe. You also found traces of it in South America. So usually it represents sun, fire or life in many of the ancient cultures, but different religions, of course, they use it to signify different things. Okay, what we want to know, what does it signify in Buddhism? In Buddhism, it denotes the Dharma, it denotes universal harmony, it denotes the balance of opposite, it denotes spiritual attainment, and some people also say it denotes the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, because you can see there's 4 main arms, and the arms are bent. So 4 main arms are the 4 Noble Truths, and then if you bend it, each arm has 2 parts. So 2 parts times 4 become 8. So some people may say this represents the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. There's a bit of background information. Well, the Nazis had a different meaning. They used it to denote the racial purity of the Aryan master race, because at that time the Nazis, they wanted to purify themselves. They only wanted the Aryan race, the pure race, and that's why they took this symbol from ancient India. Of course, they used it in a totally horrendous way to denote racial purity, and then they exterminated the Jews and many other people of that time, all these war crimes. So they did it they turned it into something quite horrendous. So by in Buddhism, all we want to know is it means the Dharma, it denotes the Dharma. Okay, in this sutta, the Buddha, first thing he did was to advise us to avoid extremes. Because during the Buddha's journey towards enlightenment, at first he was used to a life of luxury, all the luxurious palaces, easy life, all the servants, people taking care of him, everything he wanted, he had. But he saw that this cannot lead to peace and happiness eventually. Then after he left home, he went to the ascetic path. But the ascetic path at that time in India was self-mortification, self-torture. Like I showed you just now in those slides, the Buddha starved himself, he slept on ponds, he stopped himself breathing, so he almost destroyed his body. Then he discovered that that way also cannot lead to peace and happiness. So he's saying avoid extremes. Go between extremes. Therefore, he advised us to follow the middle path between extremes, between the extremes of self-indulgence and self-mortification. That's why in Buddhism it's known as the middle path. Why? Because this middle path will lead to knowledge, will lead to vision, will lead to peace, and eventually will lead to self-awakening. So the Buddha stated in this sutta, the middle way is none other than the Noble Eightfold Path. Then he identified the 4 Noble Truths which are to be realized upon following the Noble Eightfold Path. So in Buddhism, many things are interconnected. Like the Noble Eightfold Path is part of the 4 Noble Truths. I'll show you. And the 4 Noble Truths are part of the Noble Eightfold Path. So you see one, you help you to see the other. You see the other, you also help you to realize what Buddhism is about. So it's all very interconnected. The Buddha discovered the 4 Noble Truths on attaining enlightenment. So let's go into the 4 Noble Truths. First Noble Truth, all beings are subject to dukkha. Second Noble Truth, dukkha arises from desire and craving. Okay, if Buddhism stops here, then nothing, because Buddhism in that case talk only about suffering. All beings are subject to suffering, and suffering arises from desire and craving. But Buddhism goes beyond that. Buddhism tells us that suffering or unsatisfactoriness, I don't like to use the word suffering because that's a very narrow interpretation of dukkha. Dukkha can be overcome by the elimination of desire and craving. So not only does the Buddha tell you about dukkha or unsatisfactoriness, it not only tells you how unsatisfactoriness arises, it tells you that unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, can be eliminated, and more than that, how to eliminate dukkha and attain peace and happiness. And the way out of this, or the way to attain peace and happiness, is none other than the Noble Eightfold Path. So let's go a bit into it. Let's go into the 4 Noble Truths into a bit more detail. All beings are subject to dukkha. What does this mean? As I mentioned just now, dukkha doesn't just mean suffering, because when the Westerners, they first translated Pali, they translated dukkha as suffering, but it's a very narrow term. Then unfortunately, a lot of people think Buddhism, suffering. But the Buddha did recognize that life isn't all suffering. There are periods of joy, there are periods of happiness. So what do we mean by dukkha? Let's go a bit more into detail. Like I said, it's usually translated as suffering, but it is far more than that. It encompasses a wide range of negative feelings, including stress, dissatisfaction, physical suffering. Dukkha exists because we are all subject to illness, undeniable. Eventually one day we will sure to get sick. We may be in the peak of health, but as we grow old, the body ages, the body breaks down. We are bound to be subject to illness, we are bound to be subject to aging, and eventually subject to death. Then during the course of our life, sometimes we have to be separated from our loved ones. So we miss them, we wish to be with them, we long to be with them. It's part of life, right? Undeniable. This is part of dukkha. So the other side of the coin is that you are longing for your loved ones, you miss your loved ones, and sometimes you are with people you can't stand. Maybe your in-laws, or maybe some of your cousins, you can't stand them, but no choice, you got to go dinner with them, you got to go this function with them. That is also unsatisfactoriness, a form of suffering, because you got to be with people you don't really like. So dukkha is actually unsatisfactoriness. Things are always changing. You cling to this, you cling to that. But like I said, but when you cling to things, eventually you will change, because it's of impermanence, everything changes. So dukkha exists because we do not get our desires all the time, and we are subject to aging, and we are subject to eventually death. So like I mentioned, dukkha arises from desire and craving. All beings crave pleasant sensations. All beings desire to avoid unpleasant sensations. So this sensation can be physical or psychological. We want comfort, but sometimes we get sick, so no choice. Then dukkha arises. Sometimes psychological. We want this, we want that, but not all the time we can get one. I mean, who doesn't want a big car? Who doesn't want a big house? But sometimes you can't get it. But the problem arises when people do harm to others in the course of trying to satisfy their cravings. Like recently, I'm sure you see some of these news. This lawyer run away, that lawyer run away. Why do they run away? Because they steal money. And why do they steal money? Because they want things which are beyond their means. So they want this big house, they want that big car. But then when they do this deal, that deal, it doesn't work out. In the end, they go and steal money, and then that's where all these sufferings arise. So that's why all these desires and cravings are not met. And nowadays, so much materialism. I'm sure you know one LV bag, $10,000. Some of these young girls sell themselves for a bag. Can you imagine? Quite sad, right? So why? Because they crave for these material things so much that they're willing to even sell themselves for something as inanimate as a bag. And then eventually the bag grows old, then they throw it, and then that's the end of it. So one of the things you can teach your children, this is how I teach my children. When these sort of cravings arise, two things. You ask yourself first, do you need it or do you want it? Two things, right? If you need it, you go ahead and buy it. But if you want it, that's different. If you want it and you don't need it, that's different, right? It's two different things. So if you need it, it's something essential, by all means, you go ahead. If it's something you crave for, like all these frivolous things, you don't really need but you want, then you think twice. If you really want it, then okay, by all means. But this helps to stop all these unhealthy cravings from arising. So it's just a way to practice. You think for yourself, do you need it or do you want it? That's how you look at it. And there's one thing I heard quite recently, let me think. Okay, all these people you see Orchard Road, queue up for all this LV bag, all this, all that. So these are people, just a joke, okay, who buy things they don't need to impress people they don't know with money they don't have. You see what I mean? They buy all this LV bag while they go out, walk Orchard Road happy, so happy. People think that the LV bag, they're a great deal. It's a big deal. So they're buying things they actually don't need to impress people they don't know, and then they probably use a credit card or whatever to buy them. So if you look at it that way, it doesn't really make sense. You can keep in mind that you can teach your kids. People who crave too much. I'm not saying craving is bad all the time, but if you go excessively, it's not so good. So some of these people, they buy things they don't need to impress people they don't know with money they don't have. Okay, let's go back to the subject. So dukkha can be overcome by the elimination of desire and craving. Nibbana is a state of peace whereby all greed, hatred and delusion and thereby dukkha have been eradicated. Nibbana is one of the most difficult things in Buddhism to explain. Why? Because it's something which we have not experienced. So how can we really explain fully something which we ourselves have not experienced? But we can taste it, we can experience a part of it. We can experience a part of Nibbana by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. Nibbana means the absence of greed, hatred and delusion. That means you don't have hatred, you don't have cravings, clingings. You see things clearly. That's how Nibbana arises. Let me give you an example. When you are children, as kids, you want this toy, that toy. The desire is very strong, right? Sometimes you bug your parents, you cry, you force your parents to buy this toy, that toy. You give your parents a hard time. Really want that toy. But now you grow up, give you the toy you want. Of course you don't want it because you're already grown up. What is a toy to you? The toy does not mean anything to you right now as adults. But it meant a lot to you when you were a child. So Nibbana is something like that. Right now we are in the process of learning, in the process of progress. So all these things we crave, we want, we have aversion, this and that. But as we practice slowly, we let go of these things, and then peace and happiness arises. Like I said, at that time as a kid, you really want that toy. Now you don't want it. So you see things clearly because it's just a toy. So this is what we mean by Nibbana. Eventually you see things clearly, and then your greed, hatred and delusion lessen and lessen, and that's how peace and happiness arises. So give yourself time. Nibbana is a process you can slowly see as you go along the path. Impossible to be seen straight away. A lot of people want to experience now. But you can't. You have to slowly train yourself to see. Like how they normally give the simile is like a fish and the turtle. So the turtle tells the fish there's land, there's mountains, there's sky, there's all this, all that. So the fish can't see because he cannot go to the land and see. But he cannot go to the land to see all these things. So as we progress, we see things clearly, then we become like, getting out of the water and then seeing more and more things. And then we will begin to see this. I guarantee you practice meditation, you practice 5 precepts, you learn more about Buddhism. I guarantee you will get a glimpse of Nibbana. Slowly, you will. So practice, you will see. And the way out of dukkha is through the Noble Eightfold Path. So by practicing this path, dukkha can be reduced, it can be weakened, and then finally eradicated. No such thing as you practice now, then straight away enlightened. It's a process. Even the Buddha also took many lifetimes to perfect the practices. So for us also, we practice slowly, then we reduce our suffering, we see things clearly, and we can become more peaceful and happy. So as I said just now, Buddhism sometimes criticized as pessimistic because it seems to focus on suffering rather than on happiness and joy. But the fact is that all conditions of happiness and joy are impermanent because we are all subject to sickness, subject to old age, and eventually we die. This is a fact of life. No matter how you want to dress it up, no matter how you want to look at it, all conditions of happiness are impermanent, and because they are impermanent, they are unsatisfactory. You know what's unsatisfactory, right? Something which gives you happiness for a long time or permanently, there's satisfaction, satisfactory. But there's something which gives you happiness and then after a while you have to give it up, after a while you have to grow old. That is unsatisfactoriness. Therefore, you are subject to dukkha or unsatisfactoriness. So Buddhism is actually realistic because the Buddha teaches us how to overcome or reduce dukkha and eventually how to overcome the permanent bliss, the permanent peace and happiness of Nibbana. So that is the difference, this permanent thing. Everything impermanent is unsatisfactory because it always changes. So by following the Noble Eightfold Path, Nibbana can be experienced. We can taste it, like I said, even in this present lifetime. You don't need to die and then go and experience this lifetime. I guarantee you practice, you will get peace and happiness. And that peace and happiness is your taste of Nibbana. But if you don't practice, impossible to experience. You can go through courses, you can read all the books, you can talk to everybody until the cows come home, but you can never even come close to experience it if you do not practice. It's like somebody tell you, this soup, hey, very nice, how good. But how can you know whether it's good unless you try it for yourself, right? So this is what Buddhism is about. It's about the practice, trying it out for yourself, then you can experience it. If you don't try it out for yourself, you cannot even begin to understand it or grasp it. It's like trying to explain colors to the blind, it's like trying to explain sound to the deaf. You can't, the language cannot explain it. You yourself have to experience it. That's why in Buddhism, it's what we call experiential. Come and see, come and experience it for yourself. Well, Nibbana, just to cut short, simple meaning is the total absence of craving and suffering. It is achieved by someone who has eradicated all aspects of greed, hatred and delusion. That means none of this, no remnants of greed, hatred and delusion are left. So it is a permanent bliss, a state of permanent bliss and happiness from which there is no more rebirth. Because when you're reborn, you're subject to the samsara, and then you're still subject to old age, sickness and death. So how do we get out of this? Through the Noble Eightfold Path. Noble Eightfold Path, 8 components. Right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, right understanding, right thought. This is the 8 components of the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, in the Sutta, the order is different. In the Sutta, and some people teach right understanding and right thought is the first 1 and 2. Right understanding and right thought comes first, then right speech, right action, right livelihood. But many teachers, they teach in this order because they are teaching to laymen. When the Buddha gave the teaching, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first teaching, he gave it to 5 ascetics who are already accomplished in practice. They already do meditation, they already have practiced for a long time. Therefore, they already have a high standard of morality, they already have a high standard of meditation. That's why he started with right understanding and right thought. But for lay people, you start with morality first, you start then meditation, and then you begin to understand. And then you begin to develop right understanding and right thought. That's why many teachers, when they teach the Noble Eightfold Path, they don't go according to the Sutta. Because the Sutta, at the time the Buddha was teaching to the 5 ascetics, now we're teaching to lay people. So lay people, you start with morality, meditation, and then wisdom. This is what we mean when I say morality, meditation, and wisdom. It's called in Buddhism the threefold training. So, Eightfold Path, but it's much easier to understand, much easier to practice if we group it into 3 parts. So the first part is morality. Sila, they call it. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. This is a group called the morality group. Okay, next group called Samadhi group, mental development. All these are to do with your mental development. Some people call this concentration group. A concentration group is a wrong connotation. Because if you say concentration group, it means just meditation, which is not correct. Because these 3 things are actually how you develop your mind. The proper term is called mental cultivation or mental development. So, mental development or mental cultivation is the second group. Samadhi means concentration, so maybe that's why they call it concentration group. Finally, the last group is wisdom group, Panya, right understanding and right thought. For us as lay people, we develop morality first, then mental development, and then wisdom. Because if you don't have morality, how can we concentrate to meditate? It's very difficult. Your mind will be thinking of this, thinking of that. Impossible to go further in your mental development. And then once these 2, you attain some progress in these 2, then wisdom will arise. Then you begin to have right understanding and right thought. Okay, let's go through a bit more into detail. Right speech. Right speech means to refrain from all the wrong speech. Refrain from telling lies, slander, talk bad about people, harsh words, scold people, gossip, talk about people. So not so good because it's, you're talking about people behind their back. So right speech means to refrain from lying, slander, harsh speech, and gossip. Okay, but Buddhism is actually more than that. Okay, if you refrain from all this, there's a other side of the coin. You should cultivate the positive aspects. I will go through more of this in detail in the next couple of lessons. So right speech, not only you refrain from lying, slander, the harsh words and gossip, you should also try to cultivate truthful, peaceful, kind and meaningful speech. This is the positive aspects. Right action, to abstain from killing, harming, stealing and sexual misconduct. Of course, for those of you who know the 5 precepts, 2 lessons from now, I'll be going into quite a bit of depth on the 5 precepts to abstain from harming other beings through your actions of body, speech and mind. That's what actually is the meaning of all these 5 precepts. So right action is to also cultivate harmless lifestyle, to be honest and faithful. So actually part of this harmless lifestyle is also the ecology. Take a bit better care of the environment, eat a bit less meat so you cause less harm to animals, do a bit of recycling, things like that. So this is actually part of Buddhism, to be socially aware. So your right speech, right action, and then the third component of the Sila group is right livelihood. This is actually telling you don't make a living by harming other creatures, which means if you make a living involving killing humans and animals, you sell animal flesh, you trade in humans, at that time there is slavery, weapons, poison and intoxicants, all these harm other beings. So if you have this kind of livelihood, it's difficult to practice Buddhism. Of course, people ask, how about all those butchers, all those people that sell weapons, those people that sell poisons, those pub owners that sell intoxicants, right? Well, they're obviously on the path, so you cannot really compare. Buddhism is not you force people to do. Buddhism is not you must do this, you must do that. If they don't follow the path, then they go their own way. This is for people who wish to follow the path of Buddhism. Then likely they will give up these harmful occupations. People who don't want to give up these harmful occupations, never mind, you leave them alone. We just practice on ourselves, we develop ourselves, and then later on, if they follow, then they follow. If not, then, well, this is human nature. Because the Buddha never forced anyone, never expected everyone to follow Buddhism. It's up to each individual to follow or not, as he chooses, depending on his own particular conditions. So, occupations which are unethical, immoral and illegal should also be avoided. Not only all these, like unethical, immoral, you run a company pirating all this software, unethical because you're depriving somebody else of his proper livelihood. You run illegal 4D operations, all this of course is not here, but it's unethical, so if you want to practice, you should try to avoid that. So now we come to the mental development group. Right effort means you cultivate your mind. Apply mental discipline. This you must slowly practice. If something unwholesome thoughts arise, you don't like that fellow, then you wish him go and die or what, then there's unwholesome thoughts. So try to avoid all these unwholesome thoughts. And then if arisen already, then you try to keep it low. It's natural, right? Some people you don't like, you wish something bad happened to him. Try to avoid these things. And then also to develop wholesome thoughts, loving kindness, compassion, things like that. So this is right effort. This is a mental cultivation. The next one is right mindfulness. All this I will go through in more detail because we have a session specifically on Buddhist meditation. Then I will go through this in more detail, and then we also get a chance to practice some meditation now. So right mindfulness is to be aware of the body, bodily postures, body sensations. Like now, you're sitting, you're aware. Now I'm standing, I'm aware. I'm talking, I'm aware. So you're seeing, you're aware. So it's just to create more awareness, and there's a reason for this. And also to be aware of your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings. Also to be aware of the Dharma. In other words, sometimes you also try to recollect impermanence. Sometimes you try to recollect dukkha. Sometimes you try to recollect anatta. So this is just to be aware of the Dharma, part of right mindfulness. And right concentration is more for the formal practice, to practice meditation, to train the mind to be focused and disciplined, in which way you can begin to cultivate and acquire wisdom. So this is the actual exercise to develop your mind, and all these things also will follow. Again, we'll go through this later. So right understanding, after you've developed some morality, developed some understanding, then you can begin to understand and accept the Four Noble Truth. Because not everybody can understand and accept, right? If you talk to, let's say, a person not into Buddhism, you tell him all this about Four Noble Truths, he'll tell you, don't waste my time, you'd rather go bowling or play mahjong or something like that. So if you practice, slowly practice, you begin to see things more clearly. And right thought, to cultivate thoughts of generosity, loving kindness, and compassion. Because this is part of Buddhist practice. And you practice without helping others, you practice without kindness, you practice without compassion. Difficult to get anywhere, right? So you must have all this as part of your practice also, to benefit other beings, not only human beings, but all sentient beings. There's a meaning of loving kindness, to wish all beings to be well and happy. Compassion is to try to help all beings to be free from suffering, and generosity to contribute something to help all other beings. So this is a threefold training. Again, right speech, right action, right livelihood, morality, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, mental development, right understanding, right thought is wisdom. How Buddhism works is this. Not necessarily you do this, that. It's not sequential. All these are to be cultivated at the same time if possible. It's not after you develop right speech, then you develop right action, then right effort, then right effort, then right mindfulness, and so on. All these are to develop at the right time, at the same time, and then they will lead on to each other. This is what I mean. Morality for lay people comes first. Morality is the basis of all practice. Without morality, you cannot go any further. Because if you are not an upright person, you lie, you cheat, you steal, how can you go further in your practice? You'll be thinking of all these things all the time, but how to continue lying, cheating and all that. You'll never go into Buddhism, or hardly ever go into Buddhism. So morality is the basis of all practice, the most important. Try to keep your precepts. I will go into this 2 lessons from now. So once you have a bit of morality, once you show a bit of restraint, you can do a bit of meditation. You can start to cultivate your mind. Once you start to cultivate your mind, you begin to see things clearly. You begin to get a bit of panya, a bit of wisdom, a bit more understanding. And then once your understanding gets better, then you begin to practice your morality even better. Because you see the benefits of morality. You see why keeping the precepts are beneficial to you. You see why avoiding harmful actions, why avoiding stealing, why avoiding sexual misconduct, lying, all that. Why this helps you develop as a person, as a Buddhist. But this comes after a bit more wisdom and understanding. And then once your morality gets better, then you begin to meditate better. Your mind is clearer, your mind is more peaceful, you can focus better. So your morality in turn begins to help again your mental development. And when your mental development gets better, your meditation gets better, your mindfulness gets better, then again your wisdom and understanding develops. You get more wisdom, more understanding, more panya. So this goes on. It's like a spiral. You can view it as upward spiral, like a spiral staircase. You have morality, builds up to mental development, builds up to wisdom and understanding. Again, morality, mental development, and then wisdom and understanding. So it goes on and on and on. Do you see what I mean? So this is a constant way of practice, step by step, a gradual way of practice. And then eventually you attain something called stream entry. Stream entry is a stage from which you will definitely attain enlightenment. I will explain this in much detail in a few lessons from now. So once you have all this morality, mental development, wisdom, stream entry, eventually for sure you will attain nirvana. So this is how this thing works. This is how this threefold training works. It all builds up on one another. Okay, that's the presentation for the Four Noble Truth and the Eightfold Path. Any questions, please? Yes, brother?
In one of your slides, you say do not kill animals. So being a non-vegetarian, are we causing animals to kill?
Okay, this is a very good question. Being a non-vegetarian, are you causing any animals to be killed? Some people look at it differently. It depends on how strict you want to define killing. First, we have animals, and then we have eating. You eat, right? Then you eat the animals. So where does killing come in? You didn't kill the animal, right? But this is how non-vegetarians justify themselves. I never kill, I eat only, right? So therefore I'm not killing, I eat as much as I want. But Buddhism does not say you must be vegetarian. It is up to you. But many things in the Buddha's teaching point towards vegetarianism, or at least cutting down on meat. Number one, the Buddha always promote harmlessness, ahimsa, like I said. One of the things in the Noble Eightfold Path, lead a harmless lifestyle. Do not harm other beings. Metta. Metta is the unconditional desire for all beings to be well and happy. All beings, not only human beings, also animals. Right? So it's all beings. So the thing is, if you eat an animal which you do not kill, does that mean that you kill or not? Okay, the question is, if you eat meat, is that killing or not? Who said indirect? Indirect. Okay, who said no killing involved? You say no killing involved. So who said got killing involved? Okay, most of you say indirect, right? Okay, it depends on how much you want to practice. If you want to just say, I eat animals, I didn't kill, then eat lah. But in the process of eating the meat, you have to pay for it, right? Either you go to a restaurant, or you go to the supermarket, you have to pay for it, right? Okay, you pay, let's go to the supermarket, you buy this pork chop, go home and cook, or this fish, you go home and cook. So you pay the supermarket. What does the supermarket do with the money? Pay their rent, pay their staff, pay their suppliers. What does the suppliers do with their money? They go and buy some more meat, right? They buy from their own supply, they buy from the abattoir. And what does the abattoir do with the money? The abattoir goes to buy animals to kill. Correct? So indirect killing, no matter how you justify yourself, once you eat meat, you cannot just distance yourself from killing. Because a part of your money will go to finance killing. That's why the Buddha's Eightfold Path, I forgot to mention also, the other aspect. Why does the Buddha say occupations involving killing both humans and animals? Animal flesh. This is something to avoid. No? So that this points that the Buddha, if you ask him, should avoid meat or not, he will tell you yes. No? If you cannot be vegetarian, never mind but at least try to cut down killing I'm vegetarian. I went into vegetarian before I went into Buddhism. The reason is because you see things clearly. You see which animal wants to be eaten by you. Which chicken will sacrifice itself to you? Which pig or cow will sacrifice you? Which fish will jump out of the water, ask you to eat? No animal, not even the smallest worm, the smallest insect. The smallest one you prick with a needle, feel pain, right? So no animal will want to die to be eaten by you. You have to go and kill the animal to eat it. Correct? So you're paying for it. So killing is indirect killing, but again depends on how hard you want to practice. I became vegetarian because I saw this thing. I saw that eating meat actually is killing. So I stopped overnight, straight away. And I used to eat steak, I used to eat raw fish, chicken rice, all that, by the tons. So but I can stop because you see things clearly. And then the other thing is, it's a good way to practice compassion and non-attachment. If you reduce a little bit. I mean, the Buddha never said you must be vegetarian. But if you can reduce a bit, again it helps the ecology, because a good part of global warming is due to all this animal cultivation. So if you can cut down a bit, you can cut down a bit. If you cannot be vegetarian, at least try to be aware. Then at least you don't do the direct killing by going seafood restaurant, order this fish, that fish, this crab, that. that crab lah. So not only am I vegetarian, I generally eat one meal a day. So people tell you vegetarian week and all this all that, totally not true, because I can do it, the monks can do it. And many monks nowadays also seeing this thing about harmfulness, they try to cut down a bit lah. So to answer your question, eat meat, killing or not, it depends on how you look at it lah. If you want to look at it, indirect killing it is, but direct killing maybe not so obvious lah. Sorry? Oh yeah, sure. That's why the Buddha was realistic, you see. So Tibetans eat meat. Some monks eat meat. Okay, for the Tibetans, they eat meat. Many Theravadas monks eat meat. Even the temple here also they eat meat. So many Thai monks, Burmese, Sri Lankan monks eat meat. Why? Because the Buddha was practical. He's realistic. Monks have to survive on alms. They cannot be fussy. You say, I only want vegetarian food. When some places like Tibet, no vegetarian food means no vegetarian food, right? So you create hardship for the people. So you have to eat meat to replace. But other places, if there's a choice between vegetarian and non-vegetarian, if possible, you try to go the course which contributes less to suffering. That's the only thing. But the Buddha is practical. He knows that in certain circumstances, certain places, vegetarian food very difficult. So he does not want to make life difficult for the monks or for the lay people. That's why he never imposed this rule. But as lay people, we have a choice. So it's up to us to choose whether you want to eat meat or we don't eat meat. It's up to you. I hope I answered your question. Thanks for asking. That's really good questions. Anyone else? Yes?
What if you are a vegetarian and your parent is not vegetarian and they requested you to buy meat for them to eat?
Okay.
So what kind of karma are you getting?
Okay, good point. I am the only vegetarian in my family, so I encountered exactly the same problems as what you mentioned. My whole family, my parents, in fact my dad also not very happy I became vegetarian. My wife also not very happy because you create a bit of inconvenience, that's unavoidable. My father said, hey, too extreme, you're vegetarian. But then you have to stick to your own principles. Because you don't want to eat meat, you don't want to cause harm to other people, you stick to it, and that's it. So if they ask me to buy meat, my intention is it to kill or not, you see? So I may buy a bit of meat for them. Like for example, you go and eat, they eat all the steak, all the steamboat, all the this, all the that. I pay for it, right? So that's the same thing as I buy for them. So okay, I buy for them, then my karma, I think is next to nothing. Even if it's a negative karma, also next to nothing. But the point is that already I'm a vegetarian, so even if I buy a bit of meat for my family or what, it really doesn't matter. But it's important to stick to your own principles. So nowadays, they follow me. I go and eat vegetarian, sometimes they follow me. So the thing is, you stick to your own principles, you set a good example for them. Then they follow me now. Sometimes they follow me, they also eat vegetarian, which is good. So not all the time they do eat meat. They also cultivate a bit of this compassion. So I set a good example for my own family, which sometimes you can do. I will not say have to be vegetarian, but if you can, it's good. If you cannot, just cut down a bit. It's very good already. So we'll do karma and rebirth next week. Thank you.